Joining me now is retired four-star General Jospeh Votel, who's a former commander of the U.S. Central Command. He's now a distinguished senior fellow at the Middle East Institute. Let's get into this, General, and talk about the interview my colleague Matt Bradley had with the second in command of Hezbollah. Of course, Hezbollah is the Iranian proxy group in Lebanon. They've been exchanging cross-border fire with Israel. But I want to get your reaction to some of what he had to say about Israel's potential response to last week's drone attack.
What are you expecting Israel's attack to be?
الإسرائيليون حائرون لا يعرفون إذا كان سيردون أو لا يردون. تريد مني أن أعرف ماذا ستفعل إسرائيل؟
You think Israel doesn't have a plan right now?
لا تملك خطة ولا تملك جرأة ولا تعرف ماذا تفعل. وإذا أخطأت الثمن كبير.
Do you think they're scared?
خائفون 100%. لم يتوقعوا أن ترد إيران وردت.
General, he almost seems to be baiting them to a certain extent. What do you think the reality of the situation is in Israel? Do you think that they have a plan to respond? Will they respond at all?
No, thanks, Ryan. It's good to be with you. Yeah, I absolutely think the Israelis have a plan here. And the fact that they've taken 4 or 5 days since the attacks of last weekend to think through this, I think demonstrates they're taking on board the advice that has been given to them by the United States and probably a number of the other partners in terms of making very deliberate decisions about how they respond to this this unprecedented attack that was launched against them last weekend. So, yeah, my own experience working with the Israelis is they don't go into things hastily, and they think through the second and third order effects of things, and I think that's certainly what is occurring in this case.
You mentioned the fact that they have been talking to some of their allies who've pretty much across the board have asked them to show restraint. I mean, what would you view as a response that would escalate the situation, make it worse, versus something that would be restrained and perhaps contain the situation to how it currently exists?
Yeah, you know, Israel, I think, has a lot of options in this. So I think something that would be definitely escalatory would be if they perhaps tried to go after what I would consider to be kind of strategic targets, things related to the nuclear weapons program, or related to more centralized command and control activities in, you know, deep into Iran. Those, I think, would almost definitely merit some type of response from Iran. On the other hand, going after perhaps targets in the western part of Iran that are really focused on maybe the launch sites for missiles or drone sites might elicit a much less of a response from the Iranians, particularly if they didn't. If they were able to be done in a way that weren't well known to the broader Iranian public, and they could protect the Iranians had the ability to protect their own messaging.
But you still think that Israel has on the table the possibility of striking Iran directly? That still remains something that they could do.
I think that it is. Now, ultimately, Israel will have to make the decision on that. Certainly, that's not the only things they can do. There are Iranian assets that are located that are vulnerable, that are of great value to Iran, that certainly could be targeted outside of Iran. And of course, they could always return to the tactics that have been used in the so-called shadow war here for a number of years between both sides. So I think Israel has a lot of options here. I think they're weighing through that. Certainly, striking back on Iranian territory, I think does carry a level of risk that I think has to be considered very, very deliberately.
And they also have the geopolitical concerns to deal with as well, right? I mean, they have all these allies who are putting a lot of pressure to try and de-escalate the situation. You also have what's becoming a more strained relationship between the Prime Minister and President Biden, the White House, the United Nations, others kind of pressuring for ceasefire talks to continue with Qatar and Egypt. And then you've got the own Netanyahu's political turmoil at home as well. Do all of these factors play into the decision-making process here?
They absolutely do, Ryan, and you've encapsulated a number of them quite well. I mean, they have to consider the mood and the attitude of their own citizens and how they're looking at this. They have to they have to consider the alliances and partnerships. The things have changed a little bit in the last 4 or 5 days. There are now 47, 48 countries that have come out and condemned the attacks by Iran. That's a different information environment than we had just a week ago. They've got to consider what's going on in Gaza. Remember, all of this activity over the last week has had no impact on the situation in Gaza, and Israel still has a very, very serious situation there that they need to resolve. And of course, they have to think through the long-term impacts of this beyond just how Iran will respond to this. They've got to think about how they control an escalation cycle. They've got to think about how they look for possible off-ramps to get this back into something that is more manageable long-term in the region. So, yeah, there's a ton of factors that they've got to consider in this.
A complicated situation, an understated way to describe it. General Jospeh Votel, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Ron.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.